This show is brought to you by Fat Guy Loves Cake with me, Joey Valentine. Join me every Wednesday for 1 hour as I put my own crude and humorous spin on pop culture and current events.
Shut your hole, Wang Chung.
Available on Spotify and iTunes. Probably should put the kids to bed.
But stuff.
That's Fat Guy Loves Cake with me, Joey Valentine.
Hey, everybody. Before we jump into the show today, wanted to announce that I have written 2 more books. This is books number 26 and 27. It is the 8th edition of the 100 Stories, Lesser Known History of Humanity. I've also released a part 2 of 100 Stories, the Paranormal Edition. So 200 stories for you to check out. Go to johnhensonwrites.com today. They're going to be on Amazon in a few weeks, but if you want to get one as just like a dirty Santa gift or something for someone you hate, get this. Go straight to the publisher. That link is on the website. Go to johnhensonwrites.com to check out those new books and maybe pick up one of the other 25 that are out there as well. I really could use the help. Had a lot of bills to pay, and I also have a tiny mouth to feed now. It's getting expensive, and the books, I could use some royalty cash, if you know what I'm saying. It's been rough out there. But thanks anyway. Enjoy the show.
Our Weird World.
Welcome to Our Weird World. I'm your host, John Henson, and I am very tired. As I record this, I was at a conference and I was talking to a lot of people, and that I don't do that. I can talk to tons of people if I can't see them, like I do this. This is fine. Doing a lot of the talking in person sucks. So I am going to just be hibernating for the next 3 days, and then just, maybe trying to do this and then record some shows. But yeah, what are we talking about? Awful women in history. Glad I can give all of my energy to the women who deserve to be spotlighted here today. Granted, it's not like we're celebrating women, so it's fine. 4 stories today, of just some terrible women from history. We're looking at the stories of Christine Falling, Juana Baraza, Lavinia Fisher, and our first story of Catherine Monvoisin. Catherine Deschays, who would later become Catherine Monvoisin, was born in France in 1640 and worked as a fortune teller in Paris. She married a jeweler and a silk merchant named Antoine Monvoisin, but when his reputation was apparently ruined because something happened, Catherine basically took it upon herself to provide for the family. She became the sole breadwinner by reading palms and faces, which how do you read a face? I can understand the palm reading because you got lines on your hands. What do you do when you're reading a face? It's like, oh, your eyes are very far apart. That means that I don't know what any of that. I have no creative energy today, you guys. This is not going to be like an episode full of tangents, I'm guessing. We're going to go through these stories and we're going to just see you next week, apparently. In addition to Catherine's fortune telling, though, she worked as a midwife and also performed abortions, which was illegal at the time in Paris, may still be. I don't know. We're almost 400 years into this. Who knows? But what she was really good at, though, was fortune telling, which is crazy to me. And so she really started to gain some fame in and around Paris. And as she became more well-known, she began selling these magical potions and aphrodisiacs and eventually became the go-to fortune teller for some of France's wealthiest residents. Her fame And just the revenue that she was making allowed her to care for her husband, her mother, and her 3 kids, while also simultaneously having affairs with at least 6 other men. Like, not necessarily all at once, but just over the course of time. However, fortune telling started to get boring for Catherine, and so she started to dabble in black magic. And this kind of started when Catherine realized something similar about most of her clients, in that they either wanted someone to fall in love with them, or they needed someone to die so that they could either get something or be with someone else. And so for this to work, for Catherine, she would start to sell these potions and stuff, but in order to make those things, she required her customers to bring various ingredients such as toad bones, mole teeth, Spanish fly, and human blood to make, which I'm not going to lie to you. I did not know what Spanish fly was. Like, I know that's like, there was a song about it, I think, maybe a couple. Apparently it's like an actual bug. I thought it was like a name for something, but no, Spanish fly is like a bug, but the substance known as Spanish fly is made from blister beetles, which, what? That is gross. But then also, so like, that's probably pretty, but those bugs probably pretty common in Europe, maybe, I don't know. But toad bones? You got to go kill a toad and then skin it and flay it and get its bones. Mole teeth? Like, do you know how hard moles are to catch? And then they got pretty big teeth, proportionally for a mole, but still weird, like very random, ingredients and things to ask. And to make sure that she then avoided the suspicions of local church leaders, Catherine always noted to her customers that the potions would only work if it was God's will. So like, how does, that doesn't, you should, as a customer, granted, it's the 1600s, people are stupid, but it's like, if it's already in God's will, it's just going to happen. Or is God just some silly little, charlatan who's just going to make people's lives interesting and noting in his will that, yes, Pierre in Paris, he will find the love of his life, but only if he goes to Catherine Monvoisin with a set of mole teeth and drinks the potion that he gives him. Ha ha ha, I'm God. No, like, so stupid. But whatever, that people were like totally on board with that. Also, Catherine also made her clients visit a specific kind of religious site, typically the church of a saint, in order for the potions to work, which black magic typically associated with the devil. But Catherine's over here like, nah, man, it's also what God wants. And people were just like, yeah, that makes sense. I'm totally on board with that. If it didn't turn out to be in God's will, but the customer wanted it anyway, Catherine would then instruct them to pray to Satan during a black mass. All right. So Catherine's got this whole thing figured out, right? It's just like, yeah, I want this girl to fall in love with me. All right, cool. Here's what you want to do. Go get me some toad bones. All right, I'll make you a potion. Really only going to work if it's in God's will. And also you need to go to the church of Saint Bartholomew, patron saint of whatever, and then it'll work. All right. And then the dude comes back 2 weeks later. It didn't work. She still doesn't love me. All right, here's what we're going to do. All right. We're going to circumvent God's will on this. All right. We're going to go to Satan. All right. You fine with that? You want to sell your soul to the devil for this girl to love you? Yeah, she's so pretty. All right. Well, then here's what we're going to do. So she does this black mass. And during the mass, a bowl is placed on a woman, just some random woman that she finds, who acts as the altar. And then Catherine, who is still performing back alley abortions at this point, she just takes a dead baby that she collected and holds it over the bowl and drains the blood from this dead baby down onto this bowl, which is sitting on top of a woman. And like, here's the thing. I've been lonely at times. I can't for the life of me understand how someone could be so lonely that they would turn to black magic to have an aborted baby's blood drained over the body of another woman in order to find love. That seems very extreme. Like if those are the links that you have to go to find someone to find you attractive and love you, maybe you're just truly unlovable and kill yourself. I don't know. Like, just don't. This seems like it's a bit much. Other times, Catherine would have some clients who wanted someone to die. So, of course, she would mix potions for that. And during this time, poisoning had become a popular murder tool and had practically been perfected thanks to the work of Giulia Tofana, who was an Italian poisoner who sold her poison to women with abusive husbands. And so Catherine follows up with this. She studies Giulia Tofana, and Catherine's, murder poisons had been pretty successful. And so she began incorporating that into her services, and that really, she was doing pretty good before. Now that she's able to help people poison their spouses and other people they hate, her business really takes off. She begins taking on new clients left and right, including Madame de Montespan, who in 1667 wanted to kill, she didn't want to kill him, but this Madame de Montespan wanted King Louis XIV to fall in love with her. And when Montespan became the official royal mistress for Louis XIV later that year, she kept going back to Catherine anytime there was a problem. And so now Catherine is in the royal, line, not the royal line, but just in the royal business book, top dollar, really getting that. But when Louis XIV started to show interest in other women 6 years later, Montespan began going to Catherine for several black masses and even acted as the human altar herself, which means this woman, this crazy woman, just had dead baby blood poured over her just to make sure that the king would continue to just want her. 10 years later, in 1677, Montespan told Catherine that if King Louis ever left her, she wanted to have him killed. And 2 years later, when Louis began a relationship with Angelique de Fontaine, Montespan launched a plot to have them both killed. So after discussing various plans with Catherine, the group kind of decided that poisoning would work, and they would basically poison this letter, this petition somehow, and have it delivered to Louis to sign. And so on March 5th, 1679, Catherine herself walked into the king's court to deliver this poisoned petition. However, she apparently arrived on petition day because the king was inundated with other petitions that he needed to sign, and he was way too busy to attend to Catherine. And so that plot failed, so she returned home to come up with something else. Unfortunately for Catherine, though, thanks to an investigation by French authorities on an underground ring of poisoners, she actually was arrested a week later. And because, the mental toll that this takes on someone, she, at this point, is a functioning alcoholic. And so French authorities basically kept her drunk while they questioned her and held her in custody. By October of 1679, she'd basically told her entire life story and implicated her entire network of customers, of people that she had helped get poisoned or whatever. And while she didn't reveal the specific names of her clients, later testimony and records revealed that she had helped kill a ton of people in her professional career. On February 17th, 1680, she was sent to trial where she was convicted of witchcraft and sentenced to burning. 2 days later, she was marched to Place de Grève, and as she was fastened to the stake, she stubbornly pushed the hay away from her ankles, but didn't work out anyway, and she was burned alive. Fast forwarding about 150 years to Lavinia Fisher and her husband Charles, who owned the 6 Mile Wayfarer house a few miles north of Charleston, South Carolina in the early 1800s. Although several guests at their hotel were never seen again after checking in, Lavinia was still really popular among the locals, and everyone still had like a relatively positive view on her. So the local sheriffs never really came around to look at any sort of foul play at the hotel. And despite this lack of physical evidence, though, there were several rumors that circulated around the Charleston area about this hotel. And according to some of these rumors, Lavinia would invite solo travelers to the hotel for dinner. She'd ask them questions about their lives, try to figure out how much money or assets they were carrying on them. And if that traveler appeared wealthy enough, Lavinia would send the guest up to their room with a cup of tea that she had poisoned before John, her husband, would then sneak in and stab them to death while they were pretty incapacitated. Other people believed that Lavinia, once the guests were in their room, she would pull this secret lever which would cause the bed to collapse and send the person down a chute to a pit filled with spikes where they would obviously be impaled. In February 1819, a vigilante gang went to the hotel to put a stop to other gang-related activities that were going on there. And following this attack, vigilante David Ross was left to guard the area. And the next morning, Ross was attacked by two men who then took him to Lavinia, who then in turn choked him and smashed his head through a window. Despite that, Ross then survived and alerted authorities. And then a short time later, while police are kind of on their way, a man named John Peoples tried to check into the hotel, but Lavinia told him no vacancy. She didn't have a room. However, she did go ahead and invite him in for tea because, I don't know, decorum or something. However, John hated tea, but he didn't want to be rude. So he decided to kind of hang out for a little bit. And when Lavinia turned away, he quietly dumped the tea that she had poured for him and sat through the same sort of interrogation line of questioning that she had delivered to her other victims. During the course of this conversation, though, John learned that a room actually was available, which is weird. And then he decides to take it. So, like, he hates tea. He is being peppered with questions by this woman who initially told him there are no rooms available. And then she's like, oh, wait a minute, I'm so silly, I forgot there is a room. And John's like, all right, cool, this seems totally legitimate. I'll take it. He was, though, suspicious of everything going on. And he instead decided to sleep in a wooden chair beside the door in his room instead of the bed. And in the middle of the night, he awoke to the sound of the bed collapsing, going down apparently into this chute with the spikes in the floor or whatever. And he freaks out. So he jumps out of the window and flees to Charleston, where he tells police again. Now, apparently police just didn't care about the first one, because now with two seemingly legitimate accounts, police finally decide to show up to the hotel. John, Lavinia's husband, immediately surrenders in an attempt to protect Lavinia. However, both ended up getting arrested and taken into to custody. Their trial began a few months later with both John and Lavinia pleading not guilty. However, they were ultimately convicted of highway robbery based on other allegations of gang activity that they were involved with. They immediately appealed the decision and then made plans to escape jail to avoid their actual punishment. On September 13th, 1819, John and Lavinia attempted their escape by fashioning a rope out of their bed linens. John actually made it over the prison walls, but the rope broke, leaving Lavinia trapped inside. However, John, he's a loyal dude. He did not want to live on the run by himself, and so he allowed himself to be recaptured so that he could stay in prison with his wife. The Constitutional Court, where they were being tried, soon rejected their appeal, and the Fishers were sentenced to be hanged. John accepted his punishment calmly and then claimed that he had become a Christian because, again, you can just do that. You can be the worst person And then when you're about to die, just be like, hey, God, sorry about all that. I'll see you in heaven. And that works, apparently. At his execution, John proclaimed his innocence and then asked the crowd of 2,000 people that had gathered for their forgiveness. Lavinia, on the other hand, she's continuing to maintain her innocence and actually believed that she would receive a last-second pardon. However, as the executioner walked up to her, Lavinia screamed, "If any of you have a message for the devil, tell me now, for I shall be seeing him shortly." She then jumped off of the gallows and killed herself. Today, however, police believe that her ghost haunts the old Charleston jailhouse. However, on the other hand, historians, rather, I am all over the place today. Like, this is a terrible episode, and I'm sorry. Historians question whether or not Lavinia actually ever killed anyone, and just like a lot of those murder stories were just kind of extra legends and folklore that were attached to her. A lot of historians pretty confident that she was just the leader of a gang, and that the rumors of her murders rose out of an attempt to get the gang to disband. So she was definitely a gang leader, but not sure if she was a murderer and had like crazy trapdoors or anything. Our next story here is of Christine Falling, ironically born as Christine Slaughter, because guess what, you guys? She ends up killing people. She was born to a true Florida family. All right. At Christine's birth, all right, Christine's father, Thomas, was 65 years old, and her mother, Anne, was 16. Gross. That is horrifying. That is a grandfather granddaughter sort of dynamic there. I don't think they were related, but gross, disgusting. The family was also severely impoverished, and Christine lacked the basic care that infants need in order to grow up healthy. And so because of that, Christine was considered mentally challenged. She also had epilepsy, which didn't help. She spent time in various orphanages where she passed the days killing cats in order to test out the theory whether or not they actually had 9 lives. And that's not a joke. That was her reasoning, right? She heard cats had 9 lives, and so she just murdered cats to see if they would come back to life. And they never did, obviously. When she was 14, her mother, her bang-up mother, just a great woman she is, her mother forced her to marry a 20-year-old, which isn't like rapey at all. But that marriage only lasted for 6 weeks. And following the divorce, Christine's health, or what was left of it, began to deteriorate. For the next 2 years, Christine made over 50 trips to the hospital, suffering from hallucinations and irregular menstrual cycles and whatever is going on down there with y'all. I have no idea. As you might expect, that many hospital visits racked up a pretty hefty bill. So in order to make a living, in order to pay off her medical debt, Christine began working as a babysitter for friends and neighbors because she was just generally unemployable by like an actual company. It should not then surprise you to know that on February 25th, 1980, 2-year-old Cassidy Johnson was brought to a doctor who diagnosed her with meningitis caused by a traumatic brain injury. Cassidy died 3 days later, and because Christine had been babysitting her at the time, Christine argued that Cassidy had fallen out of her crib, but the doctor did not believe that excuse and recommended that the police check her out. They did not, because Florida. And so instead, Christine moved down to Lakeland, south of Orlando, where 4-year-old Jeffrey Davis died. The autopsy on Jeffrey concluded that he had died of myocarditis, which is the inflammation of the heart muscle, but doctors weren't really convinced that that's what really happened. And here's what's insane to me. While Jeffrey's family mourned at his funeral, they asked Christine to watch his 2-year-old cousin, Joseph, and he later ended up dying, like a couple of days later, of what doctors concluded was a viral infection. And here's the thing, all right? If you have a kid, you have 2 kids. Let's say you have 2 kids. Or maybe you just have the one kid, but you have family that has other small children. And you have a kid that died. Don't ask the same babysitter to watch the other kids. That's weird. That's not That's not smart decision making, but it's Florida, we'll see in a couple of weeks because the episode 200 is going to be all about Florida. That's just full of you already knew this. Just some weird people, crazy weird people. The next year, Christine returned to her hometown of Perry, and with her reputation as being a terrible babysitter firmly in place, she actually found a job as a nursing assistant, which is really just a babysitter for old people. And I don't even know how you get that job. If you just with your track record, which honestly, now that I think about it, not that surprising. Nursing home nurses, a lot of them, not saying all of them, a lot of them terrible at their jobs. Absolutely terrible at their jobs. They're just letting old people wander around and escape, right? Both of my grandfathers just walked out of their room and escaped from the nursing home. One of them died in the stairwell. The other one almost died in a car accident because he's just driving around out of his mind. And just no one's watching them. They're just sitting there playing Candy Crush on their phone because their lives are just as terrible as the old people they're trying to watch. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. On Christine's first day on the job, not even through the training yet, 77-year-old William Swindle was found dead in his kitchen. A few months later, Christine then joined her half-sister and 8-month-old daughter, Jennifer, on a trip into town. After leaving Christine and Jennifer in the car for a few minutes while she ran into the store, Christine's half-sister just came back with a bag full of groceries, and her kid is dead. And doctors ruled the death as sudden infant death syndrome because Christine's probably just sitting there like, I don't know, I just looked over, she was dead. It's insane. On July 2nd, 1982, 10-week-old Travis Coleman was found dead after spending the evening with Christine. This time, however, the autopsy revealed internal injuries that would have never occurred naturally by falling down the stairs or whatever dumb excuse Christine made up. When police questioned her about it, she did confess to killing Travis and 2 other children because the voices in her head said, "Kill the baby." And she was sentenced to life in prison, where she still is today. You can look at pictures of her on the internet. There's nothing going on behind those eyes. Just a head full of air. Just a big square head full of air. Anyway, our final story here is of Juana Baraza, who was born in a rural suburb north of Mexico City on December 27th, 1957. Her mother was an alcoholic who at one point actually traded Juana to a random man for 3 beers. And of course, this man raped Juana repeatedly and actually got her pregnant. But despite this rough life, Juana chased her dreams and eventually became a professional wrestler named La Dama del Silencio. And that's not a joke. That's not a misdirect or anything. This girl grew up. Her dream was to be a professional wrestler, wrestling huge in Mexico. And even though her mother, terrible human dumpster fire piece of trash woman, traded her to this creepy old man for 3 beers so that she can get raped, she achieves her dreams, and she is now La Dama del Silencio. But Juana wasn't just choking people out in the ring, all right? Starting in 1998, she began attacking old ladies who lived alone by bludgeoning or strangling them to death. And that's sad, right? It's probably some, childhood reaction to, anger towards her mom. But I honestly hope that she showed up at these houses wearing her luchador mask and was just dropping some people's elbows and some stone cold stunners, some choke slams and tombstone pile drivers on these old ladies. That makes it entertaining for me. Just this wrestling serial killer just dropping some bionic elbows on people. And I don't really even watch wrestling that much. I don't, I swear. And just throwing people around, throwing a little 619, just the frog splashing some old grannies or whatever. And God, man, That would be hilarious. I don't think it really went like that. I think she's just showing up and choking people, but that would be so much better if she did. Mexican police quickly figured out that like something was wrong because like there's so many of these old ladies dying, but they had no idea who it was. It got so ridiculous though that police thought that the painting Boy in a Red Waistcoat by 18th century French artist Jean-Baptiste Greuze, which 3 of Juana's victims owned, had something to do with it. So it's like just this random painting, but 3 of Juana's victims had this painting and they thought that had something to do with these murders. It didn't. It was just a weird coincidence. By 2005, Mexican media outlets were openly criticizing the police force, who responded by opening a raid on the city's transvestite prostitute community. Classic politics, right? Like, let's take an actual issue and then let's just red herring the hell out of it by focusing on something that like isn't even not even tangentially related to it, but let's just focus on this instead. It was pointless, obviously. And like, because Mexican investigators knew at that point that the killer wore women's clothing as a way to get into these victims' homes. So she clearly wasn't showing up wearing her luchador mask, which again is disappointing. However, finally on January 25th, 2006, someone was arrested as they tried to flee a woman's home who had just been strangled with a stethoscope. And to the shock of literally everyone in Mexico who had come to believe at this point that the killer was a man, they just thought it was some cross-dressing weirdo who was going into these old ladies' homes. Well, guess what? It wasn't. It was finally revealed that the killer was La Dama de Silencio. And then finally, everything made sense, right? The reports of this masculine-looking lady near the scene of several of the crimes and the transvestite raids, even, had been seen. So many people had seen her. Nothing ever came of it. Juana's fingerprints matched evidence that had been collected at 10 crime scenes, and another 30 murders were later attributed to her. Once in custody, Juana confessed to only 4 murders, but was sent to trial 2 years later. She openly admitted to the final murder that got her caught, saying it was due to leftover resentment for her own mother, which makes perfect sense. By the end of the trial, Juana was found guilty of 27 murder charges and was sentenced to 759 years in prison. However, Latin American laws, we've talked about this before, Mexican law, at the time at least, dictated that the maximum amount of time someone can serve in prison was 60 years. So Juana will be set free in 2068 at the age of 111. So while this law is still ridiculous, technically still going to serve life in prison, and she will die there. All right, some more awful women from history in the books. I feel like I turned it around. Like, to start this episode, wasn't really feeling it, but turned it around, got into the stories a little bit. I think this ended up being a pretty decent episode, if I do say so myself. So let's recap and see what we learned today.
What did we learn?
Number 1, Catherine Monvoisin helped poison tons of people. Like, so many people. Like, talking like 1,000, maybe even upwards of like 2,500 people killed from like her poisons and stuff. Did some crazy black magic when it wasn't God's will for people to fall in love with their customers or whatever. I don't know. Just some insane stuff going on with this woman. Number 2, Christine Falling. Look, here's the thing. We've talked about this before. If a babysitter loses just one kid, all right, if one kid dies under a babysitter's, you can't hire her anymore. That's a bad success rate. Even if 99 out of 100 kids that she babysits live, you got to take that one. It's a pretty big deal. And you can't be a babysitter anymore. But she did. And then she babysitted old people. And of course they died too. She's real bad at just taking care of people because she was just more concerned with killing them. Number 3, Juana Baraza, La Dama de Silencio. Just absolutely GTS and some old ladies. Oh, man. Absolutely curb stomping some old ladies to death in Mexico. Upwards of like 30 old ladies just taken out by a professional wrestler. Next week on Our Weird World, we are going to look at a handful of some really weird crimes that have been committed, or at least tried to be charged throughout history. We've got 5 stories next week. We are looking at the Mad Gasser of Mattoon, the Brazier Brigade, the Kissing Case, the Hatton Garden Heist, and dwarf tossing. So just some weird crimes. Just like no one dies in these, I don't think. And just some weird stuff going on in the true crime world. So that's going to do it for today. Thank you for continuing to listen. Keep telling all your friends and keep it weird. I took 2 weeks vacation for the honeymoon, a couple tickets all inclusive down in Cancun. I couldn't get my money back, so I'm in seat 7A. I'm getting drunk on a plane. I bet the fella on the aisle thought I was crazy, 'cause I taped your picture to the seat back right beside me. Now I've got empty mini bottles filling both our trays. I'm getting drunk on a plane. We had this date marked on the calendar forever. We'd take that new wed limo airport ride together. I feel like a plastic groom alone there at the top of the cake. So, hey, I'm getting drunk on a plane. On my way home, I'll bump this seat right up to first class so I can drink that cheap champagne out of a real glass. And when we land, I'll call her up and tell her kiss my ass, 'cause, hey, I'm drunk on a plane. Buying drinks for everybody, but the pilot, it's a party, got this 737 rocking like a G6. Stewardess is something sexy, leaning, pouring Coke and whiskey. Told her about my condition, got a little mile-high flight attention. It's Mardi Gras up in the clouds. I'm up so high, may never come down. I'll try anything to drown out the pain. They all know why I'm getting drunk on a plane.